Uh, My name is Jim Clausen from General Services Administration. Thanks for being here this morning. This is starting off well. Just had a question for you, and I'm not sure which of the three of you to address it to, so whoever feels the best informed can speak on it, I suppose, or all three of you. There was an earlier slide that showed the $50 billion in federal IT dollars that's typically spent, or that maybe that's the latest number. Most of that obviously is appropriated funds. It goes to agencies line by line to perform specific mission work, and it's usually governed by color of money, year of money, and there's specified ways that money can be used. And we've seen over the years that it's very hard for agencies within their own operating divisions to amass enough of that capital together to make large enterprise buys of software or services, much less do effective cross-agency buys, which require even more capital to get the best pricing. So my question is, does the latest FATA language that's come out, in your opinion, do enough to give greater flexibility, speed to market with that money for the CIOs and the acquisition community that's covered by that? And are there other things going on to make that $50 billion spend more flexible, quicker to market, and able to be used for a wide variety of different IT projects? Thank you.
I got an answer, but you go
Okay,
first.
I'll address some and then let Greg. So I think we're definitely working with OMB as well to try to figure, also science technology policy, to try to figure out how exactly FATA is going to apply across the board, and what are the ways that we can definitely get looking at it from the cross-functional ways that you're talking about. But also with Ann Rung's memo, she's also talking about the ideas behind IT category management and IT vendor management. And a lot of what that is going to do is try to find ways using GSA and other vehicles to try to leverage the buying power of the government within IT for the enterprise-wide types of purchases, common licenses. We're all paying this out of the Treasury budget, so there definitely are efforts that we are working on with everybody that has kind of a stake in it to try to facilitate those basically coming together on that. Specifically, I think it's going to take some time to really try to formulate the full plan on how that is, but any little places that we are finding the niche areas like the case studies, and we're going to try to expand that and make it available for everybody to really understand what is being done at all of the different agencies. So,
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, don't buy big in the case of software development. I think that there is, in our experience at 18F, because we also deal with the same thing when we're doing an interagency agreement with clients, and it's the same thing you would run into in contractors. Like there is often a misperception that the money that's currently approved actually has to be used for a specific set of requirements, and at this point we're about 100% on pushing back on all of our agreements and those assumptions, and finding out that no, actually, indeed, you can buy in different ways. And the reason I say don't buy big is it's just filled with risk, right? Like when you're trying to buy a big behemoth, enterprise software solution. Instead, break these solutions down with Solutions Architect into small modules and buy in small bites. And if you're buying in less than a year's time, you'll be able to make it in that under the color of money for specific years. So the trick here is to fail, but to fail real small and real fast on little things, right? And that way you sort of set the stage for greater successes down the road, instead of sort of baking in all the requirements you think might be needed in the plausible 10-year history of this thing. Just get started with something small and simple.
The one thing I'll sort of mention, assuming this is working, Jim and I have spoken before, and Traci and I speak quite often about, the single software license aspect and best practices. There is a CRM interagency work group. There's a lot of other work groups that probably should be popping up. Having access to those and having had the time to sort of interact with people outside of my agency who are focusing on those aspects, such that FATA is mentioning, I'm I'm really looking forward to what's going to come down the pipeline in terms of what OMB sort of directs us to. I think we still need to wait on some more direction from OMB. But as someone who, in some of my other roles at HHS, is focused on vendor management and setting up, agency-wide contracts, but really wanting federal-wide contracts on commodity licensing, I might counter to Greg and say, in that case, it's kind of good to go big and to sort of gather folks in. Because we can leverage our buying power. And I think Traci mentioned, the money comes, or Greg mentioned the money comes from the Treasury. But a lot of folks tend to just buy individually from their mission groups or from their agency. And we've done a very, very poor job of consolidating our needs when a lot of our needs for licenses are really the same. Whether or not I go to Best Buy and buy, Windows, whatever, or buy a laptop, it's really, it's the same product or service, and we need to do a better job of strategically sourcing them, but doing so in a way where every agency can get the same price and can save and gain better value.
Hey, one thing I want to add to that, so there's a difference, right, between commodities and services,
Yes.
right? And certainly on the commodity side, you want to get the bulk buying advantages. And when I look at very large commercial organizations who are doing this successfully on the outside, some of them do centralize the procurement, right, into a big general buy, but also others are just simply centralizing the negotiation. Yep. Right, and all the companies that the government works with, there's examples of them with private organizations allowing individual business lines in those companies and those organizations to buy off the pre-negotiated rate, but allow it at the program level, but it's a pre-negotiated rate. So buying big might just be a negotiation, right, up front, and then allowing distributed buying against that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mark, sorry, over here. Mark, on the other side. Hey, it's Johanna Godair from HHS. We've been working with Mark a little bit on a new procurement, and we've used some of the SB language from that contract, and it's worked very successfully for us already with the pilot project. But I was wondering, I think this works great for that 80%. You need a new website for your agency. What happens when you start to get into the territory of the 20%, where it's a very specific knowledge base in IT that you need? We're specifically dealing with healthcare interoperability standards. That even further constrains the vendors that are capable in the market and may not even be available to you traditionally.
I think everything we do in terms of acquisition is very situational, and whether it's that 80% or that 20%, it merits looking at that statement of objectives or statement of work, depending on where you're going with. And I still think there's a method to accomplish what you want. And if it requires a business case to justify doing more outreach, doing full and open competition, doing something similar to what GSA's 18F is doing now with the Agile Services BPA. This is, I think, where we're going. I know that the Agile Services BPA that GSA is doing is really just the beginning. That's just one of their efforts, and it seems to be the most priority-driven one right now. But there's going to be, I think, a major shift as we keep moving forward and keep learning and trying to bring new entrants into the fold. So I don't see a tremendous amount of difficulty in terms of achieving mission needs as long as we start to collaborate more and figure out what vehicles we need to put in place to satisfy those.
And I think as well, as we talk about the acquisition gateway later and some of the plans that we have for that, we're really looking to basically bring that community of practice, give an opportunity for everybody to come in and have one similar location that they can ask those very specific questions about the 20% that they might be working on, and post the question, crowdsource the question. We've got some really exciting tools that I think we want to put up in it and kind of have an idea for that, so that it allows very specific questions to be thrown out to the community at large and see if anybody else in any other agency has had that same situation, have a use case for that very specific part, or has an idea about how it might be solved without having to just completely have all the answers internal to one organization by itself.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it depends on how much you're going to buy that rare service. So if it's going to be like a one-off, then open market, figure out a good strategy to get to the right company and to do it that way. But if you're actually going to buy it frequently and you find that, because frequently is like relative, right? Like government does so much buying that, what you think is infrequent might just be, you might be the largest buyer in the country for that service, right? So depending on that ratio, whether you build like a marketplace specifically for it, just depends how often and quickly you want to get to it.
Hello, Bruce McFarland from USAID. I guess we're working. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your debate between time and materials and firm fixed price for agile projects.
Well, okay. There is, I don't know if it's my debate, but I'll gladly call it the Greg debate. And suddenly I've just taken a whole discussion out from the commercial world. And
I will answer the other questions
yeah,
on that.
we'll debate. We're gonna you take one stand and the other. I will take the time and materials stand. So if Agile, the purpose of Agile is discovery, right? And in fact, the way when we work with Agile development, it's a learning process, and you really don't make the assumptions of what step 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are. You really care about the next one, and then you're constantly moving towards a vision. So it's like, where's your North Star, and then what do we do next? And let's not debate the rest of the steps, because what we learn off the first step will tell us the direction we need to go. There is a tendency in government, particularly in the last number of years, to ask for agile work, and the contract looks something like this by the time it gets to the vendor. It's like, we want you to tell us specifically when you can hit these milestones, when you can build to all these requirements and deliver on this finite date. And oh, by the way, we want you to build agile. And most of your agile purists will tell you that's a waterfall contract and legal set up to basically make it so you really can't do agile. In time and materials, because we are the systems integrator and we're taking responsibility and owning the responsibility for the delivery of the product, and the we're being 18F, a federal employee, and this doesn't have to be 18F. You can do this in your agencies. If you own that responsibility, then you're buying a bunch of sprints at that point, right? Or you're buying, in the case of Agile, you're answering a bunch of address a bunch of user stories for us, right? The idea being we're buying the work, we'll guide it where it needs to go and what we discover, and we're not going to make any assumptions about exactly what's going to happen and get us caught up in that. If you do firm fixed price, you run the risk of, it's sort of like a fudged way of doing that, right? Like firm fixed price, like deliver us something XYZ by this certain date. So you're forcing the company to do a little bit of like pre-thought out building for you and delivering to something, even though they might discover something different along the way, and it's best to go in this direction, but now their firm fixed price contract doesn't quite allow for it. So it's just like a half step, in my opinion, in the wrong direction. Do you want to take this?
Sure. So when I've done contracts on Agile on a firm fixed price basis, but what we don't do is don't say that at the end of the period of performance, the firm fixed price is based on the delivery of a system. What we are actually buying and what our contracts are scoped to buy is actually buying a repeated Agile process, a sprint, a cycle, an iteration, with the idea that at the end of all of those, we know what the deliverable is, and that is delivered functioning work product, which has been quality assured, all the documentation is done, all of the, if there's training that has to be involved, all of that is captured within that same process. And it's also based on team size and then the velocity or throughput based on which kind of agile process you potentially might be able to use. So at that point, it then becomes a very modular process, and we're paying for results. And so we actually invoice based on the fact that you've delivered a cycle, and at the end of the cycle, does everything work? Is it ready for release? So it kind of takes the what we didn't have was a lot of people in my organization when we did this that actually knew how to actually run an agile contract or an agile process. And so what we did is we allowed the companies to come in and tell us, here's how we're going to set this up for you. But at the end of the day, I knew that we didn't want to continually pay for, or we've been in the past before, we pay for our own mistakes and kind of continually have that. So we really wanted to reduce the risk and put quality assurance as kind of the highest priority on that, and that is the repeatable process, and that's based on the firm fixed price. So I think it's two totally different ways of looking at it, and I definitely see where if you have a team that you've got an agile team that's all embedded with each other, and that the contractor is not 100% responsible for the end product, that it is a combination between the government and the support that you're getting. Absolutely, the time and materials method works, because the risk on that is then the government is taking the integration ownership, and in the other case, it is the company that is coming to us and saying, we need you to continually deliver a good product to the government, or else we're not going to pay you. So that's
and in many ways they're incredibly similar, and it's that's right. The one is the integration. The other slight difference there is, personally, I like, if I'm a couple sprints in with a company and I know they're not delivering and that they just aren't getting it, in time and materials, you just can stop working with them, right? Like, and to me, the goal is to make it so you can get to these services rapidly, and if you can get to them rapidly and someone's not working out, well, let's just go to the next one and get it rapidly and shift that way.
I know that a lot of folks have other questions, and we wish we had more time to entertain them. Please find the speakers during the breaks and afterwards. The closeout, I will say, is not to pick fixed or time materials. All I'm going to say, which I think will resonate, is this is exactly why you should have integrated product teams and have these conversations with your budget folks, your program mission end users, procurement folks, and bring everyone to the table at the beginning so you can walk through these steps to really determine what you really need. It doesn't happen frequently, and you can tell by the past probably 5 or 10 minutes of discussions that people are really interested to figure out what is the best approach, and it may vary. But if anything you take away from this, it's you have to have a collaborative group and break down these barriers to truly understand what you need and figure out the way to accomplish it. I want to thank the panel, and we will keep the conference going, and I hope that during the breaks you'll have more time to speak individually or after with the speakers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.